We tend to picture the Middle Ages as this time of just blind faith, right? But what was really going on was one of the most intense intellectual battles in all of Western history. This was a fight not over land or crowns, but over the very nature of truth, of reason, and of God himself. This is the story of scholasticism.
So what lit the fuse? Well, renewed contact with the Islamic world brought this absolute treasure trove of lost knowledge back to Europe, and the crown jewel? The complete works of Aristotle. For centuries, Western thought had been dominated by a much more mystical Platonic view, but Aristotle, he was a total game changer. He was all about the senses, observation, and pure independent reason. And this presented a massive challenge to the entire Christian worldview.
And this all boils down to one central question, a question that absolutely electrified the medieval university. Can reason alone, just by studying the physical world right in front of you, lead you to the truths of faith? Or are faith and reason two totally separate, maybe even opposing paths? Seriously, this one question would define the next 200 years of philosophy.
So yeah, this reintroduction of Aristotle, it didn't just add a new book to the library. It set the stage for a massive philosophical collision.
Okay, so on one side you've got the traditional view, which was heavily influenced by Plato and St. Augustine. This basically taught that the physical world we see with our senses is just a shadow of a higher, invisible, realer reality. True knowledge comes from looking inward or upward toward God. But then Aristotle comes along and says, no, knowledge begins with the senses. You learn about the world by looking at it, by categorizing it, by applying logic. The real kicker? Aristotle insisted that reason and philosophy were completely independent fields, separate from the rules of faith and theology. I mean, that was a truly radical idea back then.
Into this high-stakes debate steps our first major player, a Dominican friar named Thomas Aquinas. And he's going to attempt the seemingly impossible task of merging these two worlds.
And you gotta love this little detail about him. In his early years, Aquinas was so big and so quiet that his classmates actually nicknamed him the Dumb Ox. What they didn't see, of course, was the incredibly powerful and methodical genius working away behind that silence. That quiet man was about to build a towering intellectual cathedral. What Aquinas did was absolutely brilliant. He didn't see Aristotle as a threat. He saw him as a tool. He believed that God gave us reason for a purpose, and that by using our God-given intellect to study God's creation, we could actually get to a deeper understanding of God himself. So for him, reason wasn't the enemy of faith, it was its handmaiden.
And you can see this perfectly in his famous 5 ways to prove God's existence. The cool thing is, they all begin not with some lofty idea of God, but with simple observations about the world. Look around. Things are moving. Something must have been the first mover. Look, things cause other things to happen. There must have been a first, uncaused cause. Every single argument starts with your feet planted firmly on the ground, using logic to build a staircase up to the divine.
But not everyone was buying what Aquinas was selling. The traditionalists had their own champion, a Franciscan named Bonaventure, and he argued for a very, very different path. This quote just nails his whole critique. Bonaventure saw a real danger in Aquinas' cool, rational approach. For him, the point of theology wasn't just to know about God, it was to love God. He was basically warning that pure intellectual thinking without any devotion or humility was just a dead end.
For Bonaventure, the whole goal was union with God. He believed that a divine light was needed for any real knowledge, and that God's existence didn't need some 5-step logical proof, because it's self-evident. It's something you experience directly, like a spark of that divine light inside your soul. And here's the crucial part. This path was open to everyone. The ordinary person with a good heart could see God just as clearly, if not more clearly, than the most educated scholar.
All right, let's keep going, because the debate just gets sharper from here. Next up is John Duns Scotus, a seriously brilliant thinker who started to poke holes in Aquinas' carefully constructed system.
Scotus introduced this powerful idea called voluntarism. Where Aquinas saw God as a perfect blend of intellect and will, Scotus put all the emphasis on God's absolute freedom and will. This totally flips a key question on its head. Is something good because God wills it, or does God will it because it's good? For Scotus, the answer was crystal clear. What is good simply because God freely wills it to be. God's will comes first, period.
And this had huge consequences for the role of reason.
Scotus argued that, yeah, philosophy could show that God's existence is a logical possibility, but it could never, ever offer a definitive, knockdown proof. And with that move, he drives the first major wedge between what reason can know on its own and what you just have to accept on faith. The grand synthesis was starting to crack.
And that brings us to our final figure, William of Ockham. He's the man who's going to take that crack and just shatter the whole synthesis completely with a very, very sharp tool. Now, stick with me here, because this gets a little heady, but it's super important. Occam championed a philosophy called nominalism. For centuries, philosophers believed that universal concepts like humanity or justice were real things that existed out there somewhere. Occam said, no way. The only things that are real are individual particular things. This specific person, that specific action. Humanity is just a name, a mental concept we use to group similar individuals. This idea, which seems kind of abstract, completely dismantled the philosophical foundations of everyone who came before him.
And the method he used for this dismantling became legendary. We still talk about it today. It's known as Occam's razor, or the law of parsimony. It's a principle of intellectual simplicity.
Put simply, don't invent complex, unseen realities if a simpler explanation will work just fine. Why invent some universal thing called humanity that people share in, when you can just say they're two similar individual beings? This razor just cut away all the metaphysical scaffolding that Aquinas had so carefully built.
So, after 2 centuries of these brilliant minds wrestling with the biggest questions imaginable, where did it all end up? What was the ultimate legacy of this epic debate?
Looking at this, you can literally see the whole arc of the debate. Aquinas starts off seeing reason as a partner to faith, a way to prove God's existence from the world around us. Then Bonaventure comes in and prioritizes love and direct experience over all that logic. Then Scotus limits reason even more, saying it can only show that God is possible. And finally, Occam just severs the connection entirely, arguing that you can't prove God's existence with reason at all. It has to be accepted on faith alone.
The great scholastic project, which began as this incredible attempt to create the ultimate synthesis of faith and reason, ended in their divorce. Occam basically left them as 2 completely separate realms of knowledge. Theology became about what God has revealed to us, and philosophy, and soon science, became about what we can discover through reason and observation, all on its own.
I mean, this separation paved the way for modern science and modern philosophy as we know it. It gave reason the freedom to explore the world on its own terms, which is incredible. But it also left this deep split in Western thought that, honestly, we still feel today. And that leaves us with a final, powerful question to think about. When faith and reason parted ways, what did humanity gain, and what, if anything, did it lose?